Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining me on our lecture here in Speaker's Corner about the news from the impurity front and recent developments on the International Conference on Harmonization, the European Medical Agency, and a little bit news also from the Food and Drug Agency in the United States. My name is Christian Seine. I am since 10 years with our company LGC Standards, and they are the global product manager for our pharmaceutical reference materials. And I would like to show you a little bit about news that are coming up in the pharmaceutical area about quality control as regards to impurities. So what we will deal today with is that we will have, first of all, a look on what is available now on metal impurities. There is still the ICH, International Conference on Harmonization. Still, the ICH guideline Q3D is still under preparation. There are no news yet from them, but we have here some news from the USP, from the European Medical Agency, and from the European Pharmacopoeia as well, and I will talk you through that in the next slides. And then, even more interesting, we have seen now here, as the provider for reference standards in the impurity range, we have seen some interesting development at the national authorities in Europe that they are requiring a lot more of identity data for impurity reference standards. And what is even more interesting, and I will take you through those slides in the end of the presentation, is that national authorities even ask for those additional data for pharmacopoeial standards when they are used apart from the compendial purposes. So quite interesting news from that. Stay with me and you will see that in the later slides. Let's first of all have a look on what is new in the metal area, about metal impurities there. And when you look on the worldwide activities, as said already in the beginning, the draft guideline for Q3D on metal impurities is still under preparation. There is not much news there since 3 years. Is there the final concept paper and the final business plan from the ICH available on their website? They are much more active at the moment on the impurities, organic impurities there for the drug substances and the drug products. But for the metal impurities, there is not much news, but we will see why this is the case later as well. But if you look into the USA, for example, there's also no serious initiative at the moment from the Food and Drug Agency there, but the USP is going very much in the pioneer role there in the US when it comes to metal impurities. And what they did in June 2012, after a long time of preparation in doing the drafts and publishing these drafts in their pharmacopoeial forum, they published now in June 2012 the chapters 232 on the limits for metal impurities, and they published also the chapter 233 about the procedures that are used for checking on the metal impurities there. They will have official status. It's the second supplement of the USP at the moment, and that will have official status from December this year on. And then it will be made applicable to all the monographs with a general notice section from May 2014 on. So one and a half years still time before you need to comply with that. But nevertheless, it's a good time to prepare, because in Europe it will become official much quicker. We will see that in the next slides. And what they do here to make it applicable for all the monographs from May 2014 on, that is the same as they did it with the residue solvents a few years ago. They also there, especially even if you don't have in the monograph something written there about residue solvents, with a general notice chapter there, a paragraph in the general notices, they make it applicable to all the monographs. So even if you don't see in the monographs later on something about metal impurities on heavy metals or on, be aware it is all written in the general notices that you will need to apply the limits that are given in the chapter 232 there on your drug products and drug substances. And what those new chapters will do is that they will replace the chapter 231. That's a very very rough and simple technique to check on metal impurities, heavy metal impurities overall, but not specifically on each product. On each metal, but over the whole group of heavy metals that are able to be precipitated as sulfides. So that will vanish then after May 2014, and these chapters will need to be applied. When we look to Europe, we will see that Europe was much further ahead when it comes to metal impurities. Already since September 2008, there is that guideline available, also on the website available from the EMA, where the specification limits for metal catalysts or metal reagents are already given. And you need to apply to that anytime when you want to market a drug or a drug substance or a drug product in Europe. And the European Pharmacopoeia also draw now even with the EMA and also a little bit with the USP. What they did just recently, it's not too long ago, they published their new supplement 7.7, which is official from April 2013 on. And these two chapters here, the one 2420, is about how to determine the metal catalysts and the metal reagent residues, and the general text 5.12 is about the residues overall, and this is identical with that guideline over here. So no need, if you are familiar with that one, no need to read this once again. But here is some useful information in there, how to determine, how to validate the methods that you need to check on the metal impurities. So if we have a quick look on the comparison of the procedures, for example, between the European Pharmacopoeia and the United States Pharmacopoeia, as mentioned already, this chapter from the European Pharmacopoeia and this one here from the USP, then you can see it's quite general now. I really recommend to contact us if you want to have further infos or to have a look on the chapters by yourself. Both chapters, they are mentioning now the ICP, OES, and the MS technique as very suitable methods to check on each specific metal impurity there. And the USP call them even, in their chapter, they call them even the referee procedures there. So they make those two methods kind of primus inter pares with all the other methods that are also available still to check on metal impurities. But in both chapters, there is the need for validation mentioned prior to the use of the methods. And when you look into there for accuracy and linearity, these things, and also the repeatability criteria, and when you compare those two, you will find that both chapters are quite comparable to that regard. What is more of interest at the moment here is when you compare the limits that are given there, and when you have here a look into the guideline from the European Medical Agency or in the general text from the European Pharmacopoeia, which is identical, I mentioned that already, and when you compare it here to the USP chapter 232, where the limits are given, then you will see that there are quite different limits given for oral, parenteral, and inhalative applications in Europe and in the United States. And on the next slide, I hope you can read it in the back as well. In the next slide, I brought with me the limits for the oral applications. I skipped the other limits for parenteral and inhalative applications, but the picture is more or less the same. So you can see here that in Europe, it is not tested on these four at all, or it is not necessary according to the guideline. But the USP is also providing limits here for oral application on these four metals as well. And the same is true for the parenteral and the inhalative applications there. And then you see, although it looks here quite similar in the middle section, it is not actually, it's not really, because these are limits for each single metal impurity in the USP. But here you have for some limits in the EP or in the European Medical Agency guideline, you have here group limits. So these four materials here you are considered to have not more than 100 microgram per day intake on all these 4, and not of each of those. And then you see here there's some also some differentiation between the limits given, and the USP is also not providing limits for manganese, for ferrum, and for zinc as well. Chromium is not having a limit in the USP chapters for oral application, and also not for the parenteral application, but for the inhalative application, where it is considered to be really of a safety concern, they are giving there a limit as well. And again, I would recommend that you either contact us for further details, or that you go into those chapters on your own and see where the differences do lie there. But it's quite interesting that there are these 2 different approaches here. And the question is, which way will the ICH go later? Because they have not published yet their guideline, not even a draft was published there. And it's interesting to see, will they go maybe more in the USP's direction, or will they more follow the approach from the European Medical Agency? Of course, one global approach would be very helpful to minimize testing for the limit differences. For the limits there, and it's normally what the ICH was set up for, to give a global approach there that is then broken down to the single different markets, Europe and USA and Japan, for example. And that is what I've written here. Once the ICH approach would be in place, then the regulatory bodies in those major markets, major pharmaceutical markets, they of course adopt that. So finding consensus between those 3 areas, where the three regions, where the regulatory bodies are not yet clear about their limits, that is of course at the moment the problem there, and probably also the reason why the ICH is not yet setting up their global guideline. Right, so that was about metal impurities. I would like to take you now to the second news that we have brought with us today here, and this is really quite new. And the actual case here with a pharmacopoeia standard is just 2 weeks ago that we were made aware of that from our customer. And what we have seen, for example, over the recent month, and actually it's not really month, it's more or less already 1 to 2 years, we record from our customers a lot more queries for more identity data on the impurity reference standards. And when we ask the customers, why do you want that? In most of the cases, they ask now, or they say to us that the regulatory bodies are the drivers for these requirements up here. And what we did in the past, when somebody came up with it, was that we issued them a customized certificate of analysis with more identity data on it. Sorry. But since September last year, we started to extend our certificate on a default basis. So we provide now much more information with our certificate right from the start. So it's not necessary to contact us for all the new batches that we set up. And we will see an example of such a certificate at the end of the presentation. Okay, so but what is even more interesting, and what I mentioned was 2 weeks ago, we were asked from a customer if we can provide further identity data for an impurity reference standard from a pharmacopoeia. So, and that was quite interesting for us to see, because so far, as much as we know, very, very often the regulatory bodies just accept when in the dossier it's written European Pharmacopoeia reference standard, USP reference standard, or British Pharmacopoeia material, they accept it right away without any problems. But here we contacted back the German BfArM, who was responsible for that requirement, for that query. And the BfArM said, well, that material that reference standard was used for a non-official purpose. So it was not used in connection with a monograph, for which they would always accept these materials right away, of course, by definition. But they said it was used for a non-official purpose in an own method validation, and therefore we cannot accept it without any further data. So, and what What the customer asked us then is to provide for that material, for that reference standard from the pharmacopoeia, an additional NMR data, additional mass spectrometry data, and infrared data, which we set them up for him as a kind of additional service to him. Because the pharmacopoeia itself, when we asked them, they refused to disclose that data. They have it available, of course, as well, but they refused to disclose according to their policy. It is their policy that they are saying you should use our materials just according to the compendial and not for anything else there. So and then they were strictly adhering to that policy, and that was the reason why the customer was not provided with those materials. And I also brought with me in the on the slide after that one here, quickly a look on the policies of the pharmacopoeias, and their EP, USP, BP, and also the Japanese pharmacopoeia are quite the same. Their materials are only designed for just a single purpose very often, and are not necessarily suitable for the non-pharmacopoeial purposes. And if you want to use them as such, you are by yourself responsible for that use. And it's also written and given in the definitions there. If you have a look here into the general chapter from the USP, it is saying there that assessment of the suitability for the use in any other application is resting with the purchaser, so it's yourself who is responsible for that. And more or less the same information is given with other wording, is given in the general text 5.12 of the European Pharmacopoeia. So that is what the pharmacopoeia strictly adhere to normally always, and yeah, you can. But it was nonetheless, it was now the first time that we saw a pharmacopoeial material challenged for its identity by a regulatory body. What we have seen in the past at some points was that they challenged the pharmacopoeial active pharmaceutical ingredient reference standard for qualitative official purposes, when the customer was then using it also for quantitative purposes outside the pharmacopoeia. There, very often the authorities are now already asking for more data. But that it was asked for an impurity, it was the first time this time. So you should consider, when you use the material not for the monograph, you really should consider, shall I take the material from the pharmacopoeias or shall I go another way? Because it does not make sense really to acquire, to get an expensive material from the pharmacopoeias where no certificate of analysis is coming with it by default, for example, and where then there's also no support from the official supplier because he needs to stick to his policy rules there in order to disencourage the off-compendial use here. So in that case, it is probably much better to use a dedicated impurity reference standard for that, apart from the pharmacopoeia materials, well characterized and with a detailed certificate of analysis. And we, as you probably know, and if not, please visit us by our booth. We supply a range of 2,800 impurity reference standards that are coming with a detailed certificate of analysis. And here I brought now with me an example of such a new certificate of analysis. So on the first page, not much changes to our older certificates or the older design. Just the general information there, the molecular formula, structure formula, molecular formula here. But then in the identity section on the next pages, it's becoming a little bit more interesting. So you can see that we provide the HNMR spectrum now here, and that was what we normally provided with our older designs as well. And now additionally, we also have here mass spectrometry data on our certificate, and also with interpretation of the fragments given there, and also because it is very often asked by the customers also to give an infrared spectrum there with the positions of the bands here. So that is the change in the identity section of our certificate. We also changed a little bit the design of the later calculation section, where the purity is going into there as well. But for purity, we normally use HPLC. As most of you will know, we provide the data of our, We provide the data of our HPLC method there, or conditions, and then, of course, also the chromatogram itself with the area percentage report. And down here you see the chromatographic purity. But as you will know, chromatographic purity is not all of what can be in the material. There's water in it as well, and there are the residual solvents in it as well. And in order to give an accurate assay result, we check on those as well. On the certificates of analysis, you find that also documented. You can see here water content by Carl-Fischer titration and the residual solvents as we found them out by HNMR quantitative approaches. So it is that, and then in the and in the end, in the bottom of the last page, we also provide now the formula how we calculate the assay value that you find then later here. So that is our new design for the certificate. It is also shown in our new catalog that we brought with us directly for CPHI, brand new. So if you pop by our booth and want to grab a copy on a printed format or CD, please feel free to do that. Right. So that is more or less what I wanted to show you with the news. Please allow me to give some closing remarks here. As you know, we are part of the LGC group, and the LGC group, our whole group, is headquartered in the UK, in nearby London, in a town called Teddington. And our science and technology section there of LGC is acting as the National Metrology Institute for Chemical and Biochemical Measurements in the United Kingdom. And to that regard, we are comparable to the NIST, for example, in the US. So a lot of measuring knowledge, experience, and expertise is given in our laboratories. We are manufacturing pharmaceutical reference materials. Our most important range is the one for active pharmaceutical ingredients and impurities, where we have over 3,000 reference standards available, set up in our own laboratories and analyzed there. We also have metal impurity materials available, which are all suitable for the new techniques that are mentioned in the European Pharmacopoeia and in the United States Pharmacopoeia, for example, as we have seen in the very first slides today. We have, of course, constantly new developments, and what we also have is we have accreditation in the laboratories which deal with the reference standards. We have accreditation there according to ISO 17025 and also ISO 34 for certified reference materials as well. We also provide contract services, custom synthesis for reference standards, not for bulk materials, but for reference standards. We do also customized analysis there, and we characterize customer material and also do customized packaging and storage if somebody wants us to. This is the service modules that we provide, and just to show you quickly, these are the single steps that you need to set up to make a reference standard available and to maintain it in the right stage. And that is what we use in-house, and we also offer that to our customers in case they want us to. So we are doing services for 2 pharmaceutical world top 10 companies where we get their own material and analyze that for them and do then also the storage and the distribution of their materials. We ship it to every site in the world for them from our central warehouse there. And we also do the same for another company where we are close to persuading them that we also would like to do some analytical work for them. But here it is only about the packaging of their materials and then the controlled, monitored storage and then the distribution again to all their sites in the world. And we also do, of course, services over the whole chain, as I have shown you here, over the whole chain of the material, plus some supporting processes to get stability monitored and to retest the batches after an agreed amount of time. And we do that for a German medical company with 41,000 employees worldwide. Also for a German subsidiary of one of the world top 10 pharma companies, we are setting up primary reference standards for them, for their drug substances materials, and also for two of the world top 10 generic companies, we also do that over the whole range for them. So that was what I wanted to show you here. As you can see, we are nowadays located everywhere in the world. We made a recent acquirement of a company called VHG, which is providing us with the metal impurity materials, and they are situated in Manchester, in New Hampshire, and they will also act as our hub for the United States and for Canada, for example. Yeah, elsewhere we are located also in the world, and of course, this time at CPHI, also in Hall 4, booth number 4A73. And I would like to see you there for further questions, for asking for a copy of the presentation, or maybe also for a glass of sparkling wine. Thank you very much for your attention.